Do you believe that a simple drawing can change an entire life? It seems unlikely, I know. In a world that moves faster and faster, where emotions are sent like emails and feelings dissolve in the scroll of a screen, saying that a smile, even if drawn and can transform destinies, seems almost like a poetic delirium. But what if I told you that it is not only possible, but that it happened? This story begins where most stories end, in silence. In the silence of a girl who spoke with pencils, who offered love in lines, and drew hope where there was only darkness. She was invisible until she decided to see others, and it was precisely this decision that gave her life a new meaning. But be careful. This is not just a moving story, but it is a revealing story. It challenges one of the biggest beliefs that you may have carried until today, that you need to be someone important to do something important. This girl, without followers, fame, or money, started a movement that crossed subway cars, jumped across social media, and landed straight in people's hearts. Not because she was looking for recognition, but because she offered something rare: sincerity, compassion, courage, and a talent shaped by pain and silence. And here's the controversial point. Maybe you're trying to change your life by looking for formulas, when the key may be in a simple, genuine, and deeply human gesture. Curious, aren't you? Because in the middle of this story there's a secret that no one expected. A seemingly small detail, a drawn smile, that carried within itself a bridge between past and future, between loss and reconciliation, between abandonment and reunion. And when you discover what this drawing revealed, you may never look at a notebook the same way again. Maybe, who knows, you'll discover how much you've also been drawing, even without realizing it, the paths that will lead you to your own miracle. She was a small girl, with big, attentive eyes who seemed to listen to the world more with her heart than with her ears. From a very early age, she learned that silence sometimes screamed louder than any misplaced word. She grew up in a house where the sounds of affection had fallen silent, where the absence of gestures of love and affection was filled with echoes of loneliness and a constant fear of not being seen. But even in the aridity of that scenario, there was something that pulsed inside her, the silent courage to continue. Not with screams, not with revolt, but with colored pencils. Each line on the paper was a request for understanding, a gesture of kindness that she offered without demanding anything in return. Her small world, limited by the narrow walls of her home, expanded every time she drew. There, between lines and colors, the first breath of hope sprouted, that spark that only those who were once invisible know how to value. She didn't talk much, not for lack of words, but for lack of space to use them. At school, others ran, played, shouted her names. She, with her worn-out notebooks and borrowed pens, drew. That was how she spoke to her classmates, teachers, and even adults who didn't always have the patience to listen. She drew funny animals to make someone laugh, broken hearts to comfort a friend, flowers to ask for forgiveness without having to explain herself. With a sincerity that escaped most people, she transmitted what many adults couldn't even understand: the power of altruism in the form of art. And even without knowing it, she exercised the power of kindness in each scribble, in each carefully colored shadow. In those early years, drawing wasn't just a pastime, it was emotional survival. It was a gesture of resilience and an act of self-love that no one had taught her, but that she learned on her own, like someone discovering water in the middle of the desert. Once, during a school party where no one asked her to dance, she sat in a corner watching. Instead of crying, as she had done before, she took out her notebook and drew each child smiling. She recorded each expression with an almost magical precision. When the teacher saw the drawings, she was shocked. "How did you manage to capture so much?" she asked. The girl shrugged as if she didn't quite understand what she had done. But there was the seed planted. She had a gift. Gift that didn't scream, that didn't demand applause. So a gift watered by humility, empathy, and a wisdom that seemed too old for someone so young. And it was on that day that she realized that, even if the world didn't speak to her, her drawings had the power to make the world listen. What she didn't know yet was that this power would one day change destinies, including her own. Over time, her drawings took on more than just shapes. They took on a soul. Each smile that emerged from the graffiti seemed to carry a particular sun, illuminating lives she barely knew. But there was something that no one saw. Behind those light lines, there lived a heavy heart. While others were enchanted by the happy faces drawn with so much affection and compassion, she carried within herself a sadness that seemed to have no name but hurt deeply. It was a cruel contrast, like someone offering flowers with hands full of thorns. The paper smiled, but her soul cried in silence. And curiously, it was precisely in this paradox that her strength was born. Because even in the midst of the loneliness and insecurity that accompanied her like faithful shadows, she insisted on spreading hope. It was as if she were saying, without words, "If I can imagine a lighter world, perhaps it can exist." And with that, she planted small gardens of joy in realities that often seemed sterile. There were days when she would draw compulsively, as if each happy face on the paper was an attempt to hide her own pain. Children with bright eyes, smiling ladies with their hands on their faces, young people laughing among colorful clouds. Everyone seemed happy, everyone except her. She was a creator of happiness for others, even without experiencing it completely. But there was no bitterness in that. There was a choice, and that choice carried an admirable strength. It was the choice of kindness, of altruism, of the conscious decision not to let her pain contaminate the world. How many times after a sleepless night or a suppressed cry did she hand someone a drawing with a smile so bright it was impossible not to be moved? How many times did she hear, "Thank you, you saved my day," while she herself was trying to save her own sanity? There, at the tip of her pencil, was more than talent. There was resilience, there was the power of kindness, overflowing in the form of silent art. One day at school, a classmate had an anxiety attack. While the adults ran around in despair, she simply sat next to the girl, drew two hands holding hands and a sun rising behind them. Without saying a word, she handed over the drawing. The classmate stopped shaking, took a deep breath and smiled with tears in her eyes. That was the effect she had, even though she couldn't explain how. It was as if her drawing spoke the language of the heart, translated pain and transformed it into tenderness. This profound capacity for inspiration came not only from her technique, but from her humanity. It was a gift honed by the honesty with which she looked at the world, and by the courage with which she faced her own abysses. Perhaps that is why, even though her eyes still carried a certain melancholy, there was in each line a promise of reconciliation. With others, yes, but mainly with oneself. And that is how true change begins, without us realizing it. Every morning she boarded that same train on that same line, as if she were entering a silent ritual. The subway was grey, noisy and hurried, but for her, it became a stage for delicate observations. She always sat near the window, with her black-covered notebook on her lap and her pencil case attached to her arm with an improvised elastic band. While the other travelers were immersed in screens, headphones, and lost gazes, she captured the invisible, the sadness hidden in the eyes of an elegant young woman, the tiredness on the face of a worker, the longing shaping the expression of a lady holding flowers. With compassion and respect, she translated all of this into drawings. She wrote down details, invented names, created small desires, as if she could decipher in silence the secrets that no one dared to confess out loud. It was as if she practiced a listening without words, where language was made of lines and intentions. This notebook, so ordinary on the outside, was a true reliquary of humanity on the inside. Each page contained an imagined story from a real face. She wrote things like, "I think he dreams of opening a restaurant," or "She misses someone," who never came back. There was no judgment, only understanding and empathy, as if her mission was to remind us that no one is invisible, even in spaces where haste reigns. As the carriages shook, she drew with an almost magical lightness. It was as if for a few minutes that mechanical environment gained color, poetry, and hope. And even though no one knew, she was creating an emotional map of the city, a record of the beauty hidden in everyday pain. With that simple gesture, she practiced the power of kindness with rare constancy. A smile here, a gesture of affection there, all without asking for anything in return. Once, during one of these trips, a boy sat next to her and tried to peek at her notebook. She hesitated, as if she were keeping a precious secret, but soon noticed the curious sparkle in the boy's eyes. She opened a page and showed him a drawing of a lady with colorful hair and a dreamy expression. "This is Mrs. Lurds. She wants to learn to swim before she's 80. The boy laughed, delighted. In the following minutes, he began to point out faces in the carriage and suggest stories that she drew right there. It was a brief but unforgettable encounter. At the end, the boy said, "You see people in a beautiful way." And she smiled, perhaps for the first time in days. Because at that moment, she felt that her art was not only comfort, but also an invitation to hope, altruism, and sharing. And without realizing it, she began to make room for something that until then had no name: mutual inspiration. And when Mahai Tai, she thought that it would be just another ordinary morning. Something at the back of the carriage caught her attention. He was always there, in the same seat at the same time, like a forgotten piece of subway architecture. A man with closed features, a lost gaze, and a posture bent by the weight of time, or perhaps of life. No one dared to approach him. His presence imposed a kind of respectful silence, a distance that did not come from rudeness, but from a dense melancholy. She observed him from afar, day after day, drawing him with an almost sacred attention. In her pages, he received smiles that he had never given, hugs that he might have refused, eyes that would shine again. The drawing was, at that moment, an attempt to reconcile with the pain that she sensed in him and in her. It was a way of saying, without words, "I see you." And truly seeing is an act of love, compassion, and hope. Even if he never knew it, she wanted to offer him a little affection, even if in the form of graphite and recycled paper. One day, on a grey and muggy morning, he was different. He stared at the window as if contemplating something invisible beyond the reflection. There was a strange moisture in his eyes, and in his hands, a subtle restlessness. She opened the notebook and drew, but this time more carefully, as if she were shaping not just a face but an entire story. She gave him a wide, honest smile, full of sincerity. A smile he had never shown, but that she knew still existed inside him, buried under layers of pain, fear, and perhaps guilt. When she finished, she wrote in the corner, "The day the man at the window smiled inside." She closed the notebook, slowly, feeling a pang in her chest. It was as if, in that drawing, she had reflected her own need for healing, to see herself smiling inside too. And there, even without exchanging words, an invisible bond was born between them, made of silent empathy and the power of kindness disguised as art. In the following days, he remained in the same place, motionless, silent, introspective, but there was something subtly different in his presence, as if that drawing, made in secret, had evoked a forgotten spark. She began to observe more closely. Sometimes he seemed to hold back tears. Other times he would raise his eyes for a second longer, as if searching for something. The truth is that she knew nothing about him. She didn't know his name, his story, his pain, but she knew how to feel, and that was enough. Because there are bonds that don't need words, only understanding and humanity. One day, he looked briefly in her direction. He didn't smile, he didn't wave, but that look contained something, perhaps courage, perhaps gratitude, perhaps a silent request for one more drawing, and she knew, with the certainty of those who carry ancient wisdom, that encounter was not over yet. He was just waiting for the next page. The morning had begun like so many others. The noise of tracks, the metallic smell of the train car, faces too hurried to notice the world around them. She got on the subway with her notebook pressed against her chest, as she always did, and settled into her usual seat. That day she was feeling more tired. Maybe it was the accumulation of silences, or the echo of her own drawings that were beginning to overflow with too much emotion. While she was absent-mindedly drawing, she heard a child crying in the background. In the urge to help, she stood up, took a colored pen from her backpack, and on a loose piece of paper, drew a smiling bunny with balloons. She gave it to the child's mother, who smiled gratefully. She returned to her seat without noticing that next to her, there was something important left. A sheet of paper with a portrait of the man at the window, smiling like he had never smiled before. A drawing made with love, hope, honesty, and a rare dose of inspiration. A sheet of paper that now belonged to the world. Hours later, someone found that crumpled paper between the seat and the side of the train. It was a young art student, passionate about urban stories. When she opened the sheet and saw the smiling face of that melancholic old man, something inside her trembled. "Who is this man, and who drew him with such care?" she murmured. She took a photo and posted it on social media with the caption, "I found this drawing on the subway. I don't know who did it, but it's the most touching thing I've ever seen." The algorithm, that modern oracle, took care of spreading the image around the world. Within a few days, the portrait of the man at the window went viral. Thousands of people commented, shared, and tried to discover the identity of the artist behind that unlikely smile. What she never imagined was that her art, made with such humility, affection, and altruism, would reach hearts so far away, awakening a collective emotion as genuine as it was powerful. Meanwhile, she went about her daily routine, oblivious to the virtual hurricane she had caused. She drew on the subway, watched the man from the window, and didn't notice the curious looks that were starting to appear around her. Until a classmate showed her the viral image on her cell phone. "Isn't this yours?" She recognized it immediately. She felt a lump in her throat. Her heart raced. It was as if a part of her, the most intimate part, had been exposed without her permission. Fear, insecurity, and even a hint of anger appeared first. But they were soon replaced by something greater: gratitude. Because seeing that drawing touching so many people was proof that her art was alive, that she communicated even when she was silent. And that was when she realized, with an almost mystical clarity, that her gift wasn't just talent, it was a mission. And every true mission begins when we are seen. She just didn't know yet that she was about to be heard. It happened suddenly, like a light rain that starts slowly without fanfare, but soon takes over everything. The first message arrived on a cold morning, with just a few words. "Your drawing reminded me that there is still beauty in the world. Thank you." She reread the sentence several times, trying to understand where it came from. There was no known sender. A short time later, another message appeared. "I cried when I saw that man's smile. I can't explain why." Within hours, her inbox was full of emotional words, moving stories, voices that found, in that image, a mirror of their own pain and memories. And it was there, between notifications and silent tears, that she began to understand the depth of what she had done. Because when something is created with compassion, respect, and sincerity, it carries an energy that crosses screens, cities, and even hearts that have been locked away for years. Each message was like a note thrown into the sea, coming from distant souls that had in some way been touched by that art. There was a man who said he had found the courage to visit his wife's grave after years. A mother who showed her drawing to her autistic son and saw him smile for the first time in weeks. A young woman suffering from depression who wrote, "You don't know me, but your drawing held me together the day I thought about giving up." She read everything with tears in her eyes, unable to process what was happening. How could something so simple carry so much power? How could a drawn smile move so much? It was the power of kindness working silently, weaving networks of reconciliation between people who would never meet. Her art, once made as a refuge, was now a bridge, and with each new message, one certainty was consolidated. There was something divine in that gesture, something that escaped logic, and precisely for that reason, it was so profoundly human. In the midst of this emotional avalanche, fear came. Fear of not being ready. Fear of not being able to draw something that was worthy of the emotion it had caused. Insecurity about being discovered, about not knowing what to say, about not living up to expectations. But something new was also born. Confidence. A shy confidence, like someone learning to walk for the first time. She began to keep some messages in her notebook next to her drawings. She began to respond to them, one by one, with simple words full of humility, honesty, and affection. Thank you for sharing this with me. Your story touched me deeply. You inspire me too. The exchange was intense, real, full of emotional wisdom, and without realizing it, she became a kind of beacon, someone who not only illuminated with her art, but welcomed with her humanity. And one day, among the messages, one appeared that made her stop. A familiar name, a familiar face, and a revelation that would completely throw her off balance. He took a while to show up, but when he did, time seemed to stop. It was a muggy morning with a sky that was uncertain between sun and rain. She was already on the subway, notebook on her lap, trying to concentrate, when she saw him enter the car. But there was something different. He walked with firmer steps, his gaze more attentive, and in his hands he held a carefully folded sheet of paper. It was the drawing, the same one she had lost. She sat in her usual place, but this time, she didn't look out the window. She searched with her eyes until she found it, and for the first time she smiled. A shy, crooked smile, but real. She froze. The world disappeared around her. Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop herself. That moment, that gesture, was more than she could have ever expected. It was love being reciprocated. It was the power of kindness returning, like an emotional boomerang. And when he approached with the paper outstretched, her life began to change. "That drawing saved me," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "I was tired, thinking about giving up, but then I saw myself smiling." She swallowed hard. She couldn't speak. She could only listen. He continued, "I hadn't smiled in years. I lost my wife, I lost my son, I lost myself. But when I saw that face, that smile that I didn't even know I could have, I thought, maybe there's still something inside." It was like a whirlwind of compassion, of reconciliation, of deep understanding. She suddenly saw herself as a vital part of someone's life, not as someone who just observes, but as someone who transforms. He thanked her with teary eyes and told her about the night when, determined to end it all, he saw that paper on the bench and hesitated. That was enough, a small push of hope, a spark of resilience that was enough to change everything. From that day on, he began to sit next to her. They didn't talk much. Sometimes they would just exchange a look, a wave, or a comment about the weather. But there was an unbreakable bond between them. Two survivors of sadness, connected by a drawing and the courage to carry on. She started drawing him again, this time with more lightness. She added happy details, as if she wanted to rebuild him with art. And he, little by little, became someone who believed in tomorrow. He told her about his lost son. "I haven't seen him in years, I don't even know where he is." And she listened with all her heart. She didn't judge, she just welcomed him. And there, in that simple and magical routine, a friendship was born that needed no explanation. It was made of empathy, gratitude, and sincerity, the kind of connection that life builds with invisible hands. And without knowing it, each gesture there was drawing the path to a next meeting that would change the course of their lives even more profoundly. The invitation arrived as life's good surprises do, when you least expect it, but at the exact moment you're ready, even without knowing it. It was a simple letter, delivered by a young man who could barely contain his excitement. "You're the girl from the drawings, right? My uncle saw your work online and wants to meet you. He has a gallery." She frowned, suspicious. She was afraid of exposure, of judgment, of leaving her creative cocoon. But there was something there, in that unexpected proposal, that spoke louder. A calling, a burst of courage. Deep down, I knew. The time had come to show the world what had previously only existed between subway cars and secret pages. And so, trembling inside, but with her heart beating strongly, she accepted. It was the chance to transform her loneliness into communion. Her art would now have a voice full of understanding, affection, and a silent generosity that came from far away. In the days that followed, she immersed herself in intense and almost mystical work. She reviewed notebooks, retold stories, and chose the most emblematic drawings. Each line carried memories. Each drawn smile hid tears from a time when she herself did not know how to smile. With the support of the man at the window, who was now a silent friend and mentor, she found the strength to organize everything. The gallery, small but charming, was located in a bohemian neighborhood, full of modern paintings and attentive eyes. And for the first time, her art left the worn paper and went up onto the illuminated walls. Every visitor who entered was faced with smiling faces, but also with pieces of real life, of humanity exposed with honesty. And many cried. They cried because they saw themselves there, between lines and colors, because they recognized in her lines their own search for forgiveness, hope, reconnection, because they understood in the silence of contemplation that this art had been made with a bare heart. On the night of the opening, she trembled. She felt small in the face of so many eyes, flashes, questions, but she also felt something new. Pride. A shy pride, coated in humility, but very genuine. When the applause came, she thought of her absent father, her silent childhood, the man at the window. She thought of every tear she had turned into a smile, of every person she had touched without even knowing it. The exhibition was an immediate success. People wanted to buy the paintings. Magazines wanted to interview her. Schools wanted to take her to speak to students. But more than fame, she felt a mission reborn, to spread compassion, kindness, and reconciliation through art, to inspire others to believe in the power of a simple gesture. And it was in this atmosphere of plenitude that a man entered the gallery, stared at one of the drawings with a sparkle in his eyes, and stood there motionless. It was the beginning of something she could never have foreseen. The man was standing in front of the oldest painting in the collection. It was the drawing of the first smile she had created for the man at the window, the one who, without knowing it, had changed everything. He said nothing. He just watched, with his hands in his pockets and his eyes filled with tears. When she approached with the typical delicacy of someone who has learned to respect silence, he slowly turned around. "Did you draw this?" he asked, his voice breaking. She nodded, feeling a shiver run through her body. "That smile, that face, is my father's." The world spun. For a moment, she didn't know what to think. She tried to smile, tried to react, but the words wouldn't come out. He continued, "I haven't seen him in decades. We fought, I left, and I never had the courage to look for him again. But when I saw that drawing, I felt it was time." It was as if fate, with its mysterious wisdom, had chosen that moment to sew together the bonds that time had torn. She led him to a chair, offered him water, tried to remain calm. Inside, a whirlwind of emotions: fear, hope, curiosity, apprehension, commotion. He explained that he had seen the drawing that had gone viral on social media, and something had touched him deeply. "That smile, I've never seen him like that, but I know it's him." There was something familiar in his eyes, a sparkle that danced between past and present. She listened to each word with her heart racing, like someone listening to life. Whisper an old secret. When she asked his father's name, she felt the ground disappear. It was the same name that the man at the window had mentioned years ago, his voice choked with longing. The same name that she had scribbled next to the drawing, without knowing that she was writing the beginning of a revelation. The man took an old worn photo from his pocket with a baby in the arms of a young father. "That baby is me," she murmured, unable to believe what she was seeing. And then, the silence fell like a heavy curtain. Eyes in eyes, two worlds recognizing each other. A father and a daughter separated by years of pain, by thoughtless decisions, by a love that never died, but remained dormant. She didn't know whether to cry, to hug, or to run away, but the man in the window, the one she had redrawn so many times with hope and longing, now had a name, a story, and a blood tie. That drawing, made with such innocence and the power of kindness, had united what time had tried to separate. That invented smile had been the bridge between a fragmented past and a future full of possibilities. And in the midst of so much emotion, one certainty emerged. Destiny does not miss a line. The drawing that began as a fantasy was now real. And between the lines of that rediscovered truth, something new emerged. The possibility of forgiveness, of healing, of reconstruction. But the most surprising thing was yet to come. The day of reconciliation was different from all the others. There was no audience, no speech, no beautiful scenery. It was just another afternoon in a common square, where the man at the window now sat more often, always with a book on his lap and a new sparkle in his eyes. She arrived with light steps, accompanied by the man who, until a few days before, had been just a mysterious visitor to the gallery, and now was her father. The scene was simple, but loaded with such profound symbolism that time seemed to respect the moment, stopping around them. There were no big words. There was silence, contained tears and a hesitant hug, followed by another firmer, more full of understanding. It was love returning to its place of origin. It was forgiveness being pronounced with gestures, with looks. The reunion did not erase what was, but reconstructed what could still be. And for the first time she felt that the smiles she was drawing now belonged to her too. The exhibition continued to receive visitors, but now something inside her had changed. She no longer drew to hide her pain, but to celebrate life. Her lines became freer, her colors bolder. She began to include messages in the corners of her works, words of hope, resilience, and humanity. People came back to thank her, children were inspired to draw too, and she finally accepted the compliments without shrinking. She was proud of her journey, of the scars that were now marks of wisdom. The man at the window began to attend the exhibitions as a special guest. He would sit in an armchair in the back, watching everything with teary eyes and a sincere smile. Between them there was now a friendship forged in the power of kindness, in compassion, and in the gentleness of those who allowed themselves to be saved and to save. And her father, previously lost in himself, became a constant presence, rediscovering the beauty of humility and the transformative power of emotional honesty. And she, the girl who smiled, was now the woman who lived them. She walked through the city as if she had a purpose. She participated in social projects, visited schools, and gave art workshops to vulnerable children. Everyone has something beautiful to show the world, she would say. She encouraged her students to draw not with perfection, but with truth, with courage, because that's how she started. Her drawings, once confined to her secret notebook, were now on murals, in books, in hearts. And even when there were cloudy days, because there always are, she knew where to look for light. In the faces she drew, in the stories she welcomed, in the small seeds of compassion and hope she spread along the way. What was art became a mission. What was pain became healing. What was silence became inspiration. And what was just a drawing became destiny. A destiny that, with each shared smile, continued to be rewritten. And she, the girl who smiled, was now the woman who lived them. She walked through the city as if she had a purpose. She participated in social projects, visited schools, and gave art workshops to vulnerable children. Everyone has something. Beautiful to show the world, she would say. She encouraged her students to draw not with perfection, but with truth, with courage, because that's how she started. Her drawings, once confined to her secret notebook, were now on murals, in books, in hearts. And even when there were cloudy days, because there always are, she knew where to look for light. In the faces she drew, in the stories she welcomed, in the small seeds of compassion and hope she spread along the way. What was art became a mission. What was pain became healing. What was silence became inspiration. And what was just a drawing became destiny. A destiny that, with each shared smile, continued to be rewritten. So this is not just about drawing, this is about you. About what you can transform when you choose to move with compassion, with hope, with kindness, even when no one is watching. It's about having the courage to be a bridge where there is an abyss, to offer affection where there is coldness, and to turn your pain into a seed of light for others. You are drawing something every day, with actions, with words, with silences. The question is, what kind of mark do you want to leave on the world? Now I want to hear from you. What was the drawing that changed your life? What gesture saved you without you realizing it? Or better yet, who can you touch today with a simple action that comes from the heart? Comment below, share this video with someone who needs a dose of hope, and subscribe to the channel. Activate the bell. We will continue drawing paths together, with wisdom, humility, and with the power of kindness as our main pencil.